Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
We need to roll back the state. We spy on all of our own citizens. Our prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders. If you want to know who America's next enemy is, look at who we're funding right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of government being way too big.
You're listening to Part of the Problem on the Gas Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I'm Dave Smith. Once again, going solo. Rob is out bringing the summer porch tour to you. Make sure you go check Rob out if you can. porchtour.com. And of course, looking forward to seeing all you guys out in Austin, Texas this weekend at the Comedy Mothership. And I'm on the road all year. comicdavesmith.com for tickets. What can I say? The freak out meltdown continues. It's been quite a sight to watch. It's, I would say, the last however long it's been since that debate, over a week at this point, has been the most entertaining week plus of corporate media news coverage in a long time. And the hits keep on coming, and there's more fun stuff for us to go over. So let's jump right into it. Here is Nina Turner, who's a fairly influential person in Democratic politics. She was running the Bernie Sanders campaign at one point, and then I think she did move over and was working for Joe Biden at one point. But anyway, here is her take on the latest with the presidential race.
I want to stick with your op-ed. You did a great job laying out your argument. It was so articulately written. But you mentioned this. I'm going to read a quote from your op-ed. It would not make sense for the Democratic Party to skip over the first black woman to serve as vice president. Why is her gender and race the reason many Democrats say she should be the nominee here?
Well, for me, it's not just that, because far too many Democrats weaponize identity, and I don't roll that way. But if she were, if it was another person, if it was a white man or woman in that position, or a Latina in that position, I would be saying the same thing. Time is running out, and so the Democratic Party doesn't have much of a choice. Now, the greater point to that, however,
so pause it here. So didn't there for a moment? Nina Turner sounds actually kind of reasonable. And this is, look, as I kind of broke down a couple podcasts ago, I think you're seeing this now, that there are these different camps, right? There are different groups of people, and they have their own different interests. And so what you're seeing now, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but what you're seeing now is the different camps that are splitting up and breaking up. And of course, there's going to be one who's going to be in for Kamala Harris, and typically, it's the people who think they could benefit the most from a Kamala Harris presidential campaign, or even potentially a presidency. And Nina Turner falls into that camp. So she's making this argument. But I will give her credit here, and I'm sure I won't have to take this back immediately. But I'll give her credit because she opens up by saying, no, I'm not saying that I'm not pulling the race card. A lot of Democrats do that, but I don't roll that way. I'm not weaponizing identity. I'm just saying, hey, we don't have any other time. We don't have any other option. That is clearly not going to be the most effective, but it is the noblest of defenses for Kamala Harris being the nominee. To just go, hey, listen, she's the VP. She's next in line. We only got 4 months until this election. We don't have time to play all these games and try to. It's not like that. We got to pick whoever's right here. And so that's Kamala Harris. She's next in line. That's the most decent argument for Kamala Harris, but it's not going to be the one that works the best. So let's keep playing.
Now, the greater point to that, however, Congresswoman Summer Lease is out there saying the same thing. You got Cliff Albright of Black Votes Matter, Black Voters, matters, saying exactly the same thing. That, we got to be, that there is something kind of suspicious about so many Democrats being willing to throw in other governors' names at this point, at 4 months out. Now, if we were a year out, year and a half, I would be saying something differently. But there is a race and gender laden impact to this. We're not going to fool ourselves. We know that the United States of America is still very much anti-Black and very much a sexist nation. And so if people think they just going to skip over the vice president without a consequence, because she is Black and because she is a woman, to discount her, they are going to have a problem with large swaths of the Democratic Party, the most loyalist base to the Democratic Party, who has nothing to show for it. But I'll put that in the parking lot, Henna, and that is the Black community.
All right. So I'm not going to weaponize identity, but let me totally weaponize identity. This is literally Joe Biden saying, no excuse, no one else's fault, my fault, no one else. But it was the way the debate was structured and Donald Trump was yelling and he was just lying so much. This is the same. I don't know. This is the version of that for Kamala Harris. Look, this is, first of all, I mean, it's so pathetic and stupid and just removed from reality. I mean, if you want to say that, in America, on YouTube comments, on Twitter, there's a lot of anonymous people who say, some racist things, maybe some anti-Black or anti-Jewish things. Typically, a fair percentage of them are trolling. Who knows? A fair percentage of them are teenagers, and a fair percentage of them are just reactionary to the insane woke left. And that's what people do. Unfortunately, they try to become the opposite of whatever they don't like. And there's some of that. But to say that this country hates Blacks or hates women or anything like that is just so removed from reality. It's just not the United States of America. It's actually not much of a problem at all. If you go around this country, it's not true that you just find wow, people just hate Black people in this country. It's just not true. And the same for women. Anyway, this is the argument that you have to make if you're trying to get Kamala Harris over. And the truth is that this is as I've pointed out many times, and this has kind of been the theme of Twitter today and of people talking about this stuff, is that Kamala Harris now here's the case for Kamala Harris. And I did predict this. I mean, I've been predicting this for years. It was pretty easy to see that Kamala Harris within Democratic culture is going to be tough to just jump over if she doesn't want to be jumped over. She has a really compelling argument that is airtight amongst any woke progressive, which is sorry, next in line and woman of color. There you go. However, there's this other obvious explanation, as is typically the case when progressives are claiming something is bigotry. Typically, they're just ignoring what the obvious alternative explanation is. So why is it, Nina Turner, why is it that immediately when it was impossible to pretend that Joe Biden wasn't senile anymore, and even the entire corporate media had to kind of crack and admit that at least the range is now from he should drop out to at least we gotta consider the possibility that he should drop out. Why is it that everyone immediately started talking about other people and not Kamala Harris? Well, one explanation is because, everybody's so sexist and racist. And by the way, think about this. These conversations are not coming from Republicans. They're not coming from conservatives or right wingers. That's not who's having these conversations, or even libertarians or anything like that. That's not who's having these conversations right now. All of those people, are quite happy for Joe Biden to run again. Okay, Joe Biden, run. If you're a Trump supporter, there's nothing more you want than Joe Biden to stay in this race. That's obviously, after a debate performance like that, that's the guy you want on the ballot for sure. And then a guy who's already just being soundly defeated in the polls before that debate performance, and it's only gotten worse since then. The people who are skipping over Kamala Harris here were all Democratic operatives. That's who Nina Turner is saying hates Black people and hates women. Come on. Everybody who's living in reality knows that they would love those qualities in a candidate. They love to be able to say, we're running a female person of color. There's just an obvious alternative explanation for why they were skipping over Kamala Harris. And that's because she's so bad at this. She's so bad at this. I mean, she's not senile like Joe Biden, but she has just as much trouble speaking. Maybe she doesn't have trouble speaking. She has trouble being coherent. She's incredibly unlikable. She has this obnoxious not human sounding cackle that she does at points where no punchline has been said, nothing funny has been said, but she just erupts into like nails on the chalkboard cackling. Like maybe that's why. Look, Kamala Harris ran for president. She was at like 1%. Then Tulsi Gabbard nuked her off the stage and she had to shut down her campaign. She was thoroughly rejected after getting a whole bunch of big donor support in her presidential primary. Perhaps she's just not good. Perhaps she's just a really unlikable person who also happens to be like a genuinely evil climber. And that's fairly transparent in her. You know, this is the problem with just casting out these labels of like sexism and racism, is that they often become excuses for people for why they're not succeeding or why people don't like them. But that's not the problem. Look, here's the thing, and this is almost like a theme that you got to keep throughout this whole thing. The problem that the corporate media is having right now, and it's fairly glorious to watch them have this problem, is that they're scrambling for how to get back the narrative. But it's an impossible narrative to recover. It's just impossible. You know how like if like I was never a big chess player, but you know how if you just loosely are familiar with chess, you know when you're trying to like checkmate someone's king, you kind of try to like narrow down the amount of space that they have, and you narrow it down until you have them trapped. And what's happened is that if you could kind of think about it, like if you move your rook to one line, it's like, okay, the king can't move to that line anymore. And then you move another one to another line. Now he's stuck between those two lines. You have these like forcing moves where you have no choice but to make this move. And then I do this. And now you have no choice but to make this move. And that's kind of the idea. The Joe Biden's debate performance was so horrible that it forced the corporate media to admit it. Because even for their viewers, there's even a threshold where they're like, we can't come back from this commercial and pretend that wasn't the epic disaster that it was. Like, we can't just have an old man shit his pants on camera and then come back to us and go, he did great. You know, like even that is a bridge too far for them. Okay. But so then they're forced into this, like, okay, we have to admit that he's not the candidate. And we have to jump. We know Kamala's so terrible that we have to jump to other people. And then another faction comes in who gets behind Kamala. And you're like, oh shit, we have to deal with that now. But the problem you have, right? The inherent problem with why you're getting checkmated right now, and this is what's beautiful about it, is that having the conversation already ends the conversation. Like, in other words, if the most ardent Biden supporters have to sit here and even they themselves have to say, I don't know if he should run. Once that's the conversation, then it's over. Then he shouldn't run. If you even have to have the conversation 4 months before the election, you have to have the conversation over whether this guy can be the nominee, then to ask the question is to answer the question. Obviously, no one capable of being president would have that question asked about them. And then now for Kamala Harris, you know that everybody immediately in their minds bypassed you. And why? Because like you're so clearly terrible. And now that's attached to you, no matter what. No matter what, even if you're the nominee now, the whole narrative about you can easily be painted that like even none of them wanted her to be the nominee. You guys are just stuck with her. You didn't even choose her. And if you look at the polls, they're both losing to Trump right now. So they're in a real tough spot. And it's going to be fun to keep watching how they deal with this. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Nevin Eyewear. They are my favorite sunglass company. You guys got to check them out. These sunglasses are a steal, crisp lenses, and a ton of styles at fantastic prices. Check out Nevin Eyewear. If you're like me, you've bought really expensive sunglasses and lost or broken them, or if you grab pairs from the gas station or convenience store, they don't look good and the lenses just aren't right. Nevin Eyewear has polarized lenses, and I love the clarity of the shaded lens. I was just wearing them this last week while I was on vacation. I brought a few pairs out with me. I ended up losing one of them because I always lose my sunglasses, but it doesn't really matter because Nevin's got such great prices that I could just take advantage of that. And so you got to go check them out. They're actually really nice sunglasses. They look good, they feel good, and they're very affordable. So for fans of this show, if you want to try a pair of regular sunglasses, I got the hookup for you. 50% off any one regular pair with promo code PROBLEM. Or if you want to stock up, you can take advantage of their buy one, get any two free deal. These discounts are not available on prescriptions, but for all the non-prescription ones, you can take advantage of that. Check them out right now at nevineyewear.com. Quality shades at a great price, nevineyewear.com. All right, let's get back into the show. Let's go to the next clip that we had. I'm sorry, I'm spacing on what I said the next clip was supposed to be. What do we got here? Oh, yes, of course. This was Van Jones actually having a pretty interesting moment. Van Jones was one of the guys who immediately called for Joe Biden to drop out after the debate. And I've met Van Jones once or twice. He is a real hardcore leftist. Not a leftist who is attempting to, state, let's say, is a true critic of power, because there are leftists like that. He's a leftist who is very comfortable trying to wield power, which is the worst kind. But he is a very bright guy. And he's sometimes actually says some real shit occasionally. So anyway, let's play this clip because this is an interesting admission.
And he's doing what he's supposed to do. I'm glad to see him out there. I'm glad he's doing interviews. I'm glad he's doing all those things. The challenge is that the numbers are not encouraging, and the party is no longer united. You already have 4 House Democrats who are saying step down. You're going to have more. You're going to have more. This week, unfortunately, you're going to have the split screen of the president having, NATO allies here and people in his own party looking at this math. As David Axelrod said, this time 4 years ago, Biden was up 10. He's down 6. We needed that debate to turn things around. It did turn things around in a negative direction. And so I think that he's going to have to look in his heart. This is a party that loves him. I've never heard so many people say about a politician, I love this man. Not just I respect him, not just I admire him. I love Joe Biden. He is beloved in this party. And yet he may not be able to get us across the finish line. And I think people are hoping that he will recognize we're running Kamala Harris for president right now. That's who we're running. Nobody believes Joe Biden's going to be president in 4 years. And so we're in the worst possible world because she can't defend herself. She has to defend him. We can't defend her. We have to defend him. If we're basically running Kamala Harris anyway, let's run Kamala Harris and let her get out there and defend herself and accept that's where we are. The reality is we are running Kamala Harris for president one way or the other. I'd rather run her for president in the strongest way rather than the weakest way.
Bakari?
Let's pause there because actually that was the only interesting part of the video to me, but it really is worth kind of breaking down there. First of all, there's a huge admission that Van Jones makes here, and this is what I mean by he's the type of leftist who's trying to wield power. One of the huge advantages that those types of progressives have over everyone else is that they really are like disciples of Saul Alinsky. Like they follow a playbook. They're not like, there's a difference between the way the vast majority of conservative people and libertarian people, there's a very big difference between the way we kind of approach things and the way that like Alinsky trained radicals approach things. And we are typically trying to have a conversation, trying to defend our principles and our arguments and trying to kind of compete in the marketplace of ideas. They are not. They are committed to like this uniformed approach of moving an agenda forward. And they're quite happy to like lie on their way to doing that. It's not about winning the argument. If you have a better argument, well, then the idea is I smear you and then you're discredited in the eyes of people. It's like everything's like a tactic to move to the next level. I mean, progressives, the part of the reason why they win, and they're winning the culture war and winning like the policy war, is that they like progressives are the type of people like, libs of TikTok will have like all those people. Progressives will take a job for $40K a year and do it for 20 years to move the ball forward. And while they're doing it, repeat I'll go be a public school teacher and I will repeat every single mantra of the progressive agenda. And that's it. The point that Van Jones said there, that he said is kind of revealing about that, is he goes, as long as we're running Joe Biden, Kamala Harris can't defend herself because she's got to defend Joe Biden. We're not allowed to defend Kamala. We got to defend Joe Biden. And so you see what he's kind of giving away there. It goes, we have to go into campaign mode and we have to just say everything great about Joe Biden now. That's the position we're in unless this guy drops out. If he's still in, I got to just defend him. I can't defend Kamala Harris. I can't say how great she is because that would hurt him as a candidate. See, that's how their minds work. It's a big advantage. Anyway, the broader point that he makes there is a very good point. Like just in terms of being a political analyst, it's a very good point, and it's one that I probably didn't appreciate until he kind of laid it out that way. But what he meant by we're running Kamala Harris either way is that, yeah, I mean, even if the question right now, the reason why there's a question over whether Joe Biden should be the candidate in most people's minds is like, can he really do this for 4 more months and beat Donald Trump? That's a question of whether he can do this for 4 more months. 4 more years, almost nobody believes that Joe Biden is actually going to be president of the United States for another 4 years. I don't even think I had really thought about that until he mentioned it. I was right away convinced like he's not going to be the nominee. And I'm still convinced of that. But yeah, it's a good point. You're already running Kamala Harris. If you're running Joe Biden, you're essentially saying, look, he's going to be president for maybe another year. And then you got 3 years of Kamala Harris after that. So you are essentially already running her, but running her in the weakest way you possibly could. Where instead of getting up there and trying to sell herself, she's trying to sell you on a senile old man. It's like that. It is true that if you look at it from that Alinsky, progressive worldview, this is just not a smart play. A smarter play at this point is to just run Kamala Harris. I've kind of been debating over the last few episodes and over the last few days, just thinking about it, like what really is better at this point? Because Kamala is so bad that it's still a debate. But I was leaning toward, I think you're better off just with Kamala Harris. Like I'm saying, removing, my feelings from it, just if you're trying to get a Democrat elected. But I think that pretty much kind of sold me on the idea that if you're a Democrat, you're better off with Kamala Harris at this point. As terrible as she is, at least you can run her because you got to run her either way. Nobody actually believes Joe Biden can be president for long. And so that is, it's a very honest admission in a way by Van Jones there. And I think it just it just adds another layer to the kind of trap that the media is in. They kind of can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. You can't, I remember after the Obama Mitt Romney debate, I think it was the first one where everyone basically said Obama had a bad night. He kind of lost it. And he lost the debate. He kind of, he seemed kind of like bored and aloof and a little like holier than that, which Obama would always have a tendency to get that way. Obama was always great at delivering a speech. He was never particularly great at engaging with difficult questions or with debates. He wasn't that good at that. He was better in 2008, but when he had no track record really. But he did a very bad job in the first debate. And I remember MSNBC people were like freaking out after the debate. And Chris Matthews was yelling and he was like, what was he doing out there? He's letting Romney win. And he's beating him and he was hunting, whatever. But there was never even a thought of a call for him to not be the nominee. And so they could kind of put that toothpaste back in the tube. Chris Matthews would yell at him, but then the next day he'd give a really great speech and he'd be like, yeah, there's the Obama. What, where was that guy during the debate? All right, we're back. You can kind of move past the point that the fact that they all said, he didn't have a good night. But you can't move past the fact that immediately everyone was like, he cannot do this. And it's not that he had a bad night. It's that he looked comatose. That you can't get past that. And so now they're in a position where they're either going to have to figure out the riddle of how the hell to buy Kamala Harris off so that she doesn't go nuclear and just play the woke card on you and totally tank whoever your next nominee is. And if you can't figure out how to solve that riddle, then you got to go with Kamala Harris right now. If you're the establishment, that's who you got to go with. And what a position for the most powerful establishment in the history of the world to be forced to pick Kamala Harris as their nominee. God, wouldn't that be something? All right, let's keep it moving. It's Sunday night as I'm recording this, so the big Sunday shows were on this week, and there was. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Brian. What is the next clip? Is it Adam Schiff? Yes, that's what. Okay, back to that. And of course, one of the big ones is Meet the Press. When I say one of the big ones, I don't know how big it is these days, but it used to be like the biggest show was Meet the Press before everyone figured out that the corporate media is made up of lizard sociopathic liars. Everyone used to watch Meet the Press. Anyway, Adam Schiff was on today. Adam Schiff is, I think, he's up there with the easiest to hate politicians in the United States of America. I mean, just like a sociopathic creature, if there is one in Washington, D.C. Of course, you guys might remember he was the head of the House Intelligence Committee during Donald Trump's presidency. And he was the one who came on national television over and over again and told the American people that he had seen the evidence proving Trump's involvement in a conspiracy with the Russians, and that Mueller had the same evidence he had, and that Mueller was going to be handing out indictments and all of this stuff. And you could see where that's enough to convince your great aunt or something like that, right? They're like, hey, I just saw on TV this man in a suit and tie who's the head of the House Intelligence Committee, and he told me he's seen information that this guy Trump is involved in a conspiracy with the Russians. I mean, that's enough for me. He wouldn't just say that if he hadn't seen it. But no, that's actually what he was doing. He was just saying it. And he's terrible on a lot of different things. But anyway, he was on Meet the Press this morning. Let's check that out.
Now is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, a candidate for Senate. Congressman Schiff, welcome back to Meet the Press. Thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
It is great to have you here. I want to get your gut reaction to that interview on Friday night. Obviously, the president trying to turn the page. Based on what you saw, do you think he is still the strongest candidate to beat former President Trump?
Well, ultimately, this is a decision President Biden is going to have to make, and President Biden alone. But I would say this. He has been an extraordinary president. He has created millions and millions of jobs. He has expanded and strengthened our NATO alliances. He has brought back manufacturing in this country. He has brought about the most aggressive attack on climate change. He has done more in one term than most presidents ever do, no matter how many terms they get. And he's running against someone who's a pathological liar, someone who ran the country into the ground by his mishandling of a deadly pandemic, someone who is a pathological, not only a pathological liar, but is immoral, indecent, unfit for office. But the performance on the debate stage, I think rightfully raised questions among the American people about whether the president has the vigor to defeat Donald Trump. And this is an existential race. Given Joe Biden's incredible record, given Donald Trump's terrible record, he should be mopping the floor with Donald Trump. Joe Biden is running against a criminal. It should not be even close, and there's only one reason it is close, and that's the president's age. And what I would say, Kristen, what I would advise the president is seek out the opinions of people you trust. He's obviously talked to his family about this, and that's important. But he should seek out people with some distance and objectivity. He should seek out pollsters who are not his own pollsters. He should take a moment to make the best informed judgment.
All right. So there you have. So there you have Adam Schiff, essentially throwing Joe Biden under the bus, in I would say the snakiest way. Because keep in mind, it's funny, he calls Donald Trump a pathological liar. Like I just told you, this guy is every bit as much of a liar as anybody in that evil town of Washington, D.C. He would be very comfortable lying. And so he's an extra snake because he doesn't even have the decency to just come out and say, yeah, I think Joe Biden should get out of the race. But this is like the point I was making with you guys before. Even saying that, like, just in the world of politics, especially among people like Adam Schiff, who will lie through his teeth and does it constantly, to say, well, I think it's a decision he has to make. And if he doesn't, he should be mopping the floor with him, and he's not. So if he doesn't think he's the best guy to beat Trump, he really should be getting out of the race. That's the same thing as saying get out of the race. Because if there was it, like, unless your answer to that is like, what are you talking about? Of course he should stay in the race. He's about to be reelected. Anything short of that is like obviously a call for him to drop out. When has there ever been a situation where, if anyone, how many Trump supporters right now, if you just ask them, should Donald Trump drop out of the race? What are you talking about? Why would he drop out of the race? Of course not. I'm supporting him. I want him to stay in the race and win. You could never imagine anyone, Obama or Clinton or Bush or any of them ever saying this. So as soon as you even start indicating that maybe, right, maybe there's a chance he's unfit to be president, well, then he can't be the nominee. See, this is that's not how politics works. You can't go, maybe he's unfit for, maybe he's not medically able to be president, but I'll still support him if he runs. You're obviously just saying that you're not going to, like, that this guy shouldn't be the candidate. And so that all of this stuff, all of that's it's as damning as anything you could imagine. It's as damning as, saying the guy is a lunatic who murders people. That's saying he can't be the nominee. But of course, Adam Schiff doesn't actually even have the courage to just come out and say that, because he's hedging his bets like, well, I want to not offend anybody or whatever. And the other thing there that's a major cop-out that they end up getting away with now, of course, is that they go, well, Joe Biden should be killing Donald Trump, but the only reason he's not is because of his age. And this is the new, coping mechanism of the establishment now, is that, that's the only reason why. But that's also just not true. It's not true. I mean, it's not like Hillary Clinton was senile and Donald Trump beat her. And even if Joe Biden wasn't senile, this would be a very close race still. And the reason for that is it's not just Joe Biden's age. It's also his disastrous results. Obviously their job is going to be to downplay that now. But for everyone who's not in this world of being sociopathic liars, you can admit that actually, no, there's a lot of people who support Donald Trump. Tens of millions of people support Donald Trump very passionately. And there's a reason for that. Agree with them or disagree with them. There's a reason for that. And one of the major reasons why Donald Trump is up in the polls now, while he was down in the polls at this time in 2020, is because Joe Biden's track record has been very bad. And the major two things on that every single poll bears out, and this is the stuff that the corporate media has been ignoring. If you remember, like months ago, we kind of had a running theme on this show where we were talking about how the narrative from the corporate media was that the economy is really great, but people just don't know it. And that's the problem. Joe Biden hasn't sold the economy. This is what they were telling themselves this whole time. But it's been overwhelmingly clear, if you look at any of the polling data of where Americans are at, or if you just talk to people, you could figure this out pretty quickly too. But the big issues that people have is the border and their money. Those are the big two issues. Every single poll comes back. What are the top two issues? The economy and immigration. And what is the issue with the economy? Talk to anyone. It's the price inflation. And that price inflation over these last few years has just been a killer. And they can tell you that inflation is coming down, but we all know that's not true. It's not true. Inflation is cumulative and it's not coming down. The prices are going up. And for Americans, to put together, years of high price inflation. It's just devastating. We all experience this all the time, every single day. Everybody who goes food shopping still knows that their prices of food is way higher than it was in 2020. It's not just true for food, it's true for nearly everything. And this has been devastating for people. People who make good money are hurt by it, but people who don't make good money are just absolutely devastated by it. And of course, then the Biden's immigration policy is like unpopular amongst super majorities of the American people. So those are the issues that they have. Okay, I want us sticking to today's episode of Meet the Press. There was a interesting exchange between Kristen Walker, I believe the host's name is now, and JD Vance, who is on there. So let's pull up this video because this one was kind of fun.
Senator, if former President Trump were to win, if you were to be his vice president, would you support him appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, the Bidens?
Well, first of all, Kristen, I find it interesting how much the media and the Democrats have lost their mind over this particular quote. Donald Trump is talking about appointing a special prosecutor to investigate Joe Biden for wrongdoing. Joe Biden has done exactly that for the last few years and has done far more in addition to that to engage in a campaign of lawfare against his political opposition. I think what Donald Trump is simply saying is we ought to investigate the prior administration. There are obviously many instances of wrongdoing. The House Oversight Committee has identified a number
so let's just pause it right here to be clear. This is if you I don't know, if you kind of don't pay attention to the corporate media anymore, which is, by the way, not a bad way to go. It's totally reasonable to not pay attention to it at all. I think at times it is worth paying attention to just to see what the kind of it's when you're awake to how full of shit they all are. Once you've taken the red pill, it can be valuable to see what it is that the kind of halls of power want the American people to hear. Like you kind of figure out, okay, like what's the propaganda for today? How are people being programmed? Because really all that's all you're getting on these shows like Meet the Press. It's like, okay, they've gotten their marching orders. This is the propaganda angle for today. But for those of you who are removed to it, yes, believe it or not, the line that they're going with is actually that Donald Trump, if reelected, could start prosecuting his political enemies. That is actually what they're trying to scare people about. So, if you can breathe in that irony and let it settle in your stomach for a moment and then go, okay, now that you've digested that, yes, that is actually what they're doing. They're sitting here and saying that Donald Trump is threatening to appoint a special prosecutor to Joe Biden. And that is the great fear of why we can't let Donald Trump get in there, because he might prosecute his political opponents as they're doing that to him. All right, let's keep playing.
The House Oversight Committee has identified a number of corrupt business transactions that may or may not be criminal. Of course, you have to investigate to find out. So I think Donald Trump saying, look, let's do the basic work of investigating wrongdoing is a totally reasonable thing for him to do. And frankly, the Biden administration has done far worse. So if you think that what Donald Trump is proposing is a threat to democracy, isn't what Biden has already done a massive threat to our system of law and government?
Senator, just to be very clear, though, Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor. The Attorney General did that. Trump was indicted by grand juries. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in New York. But can we just go back to
so just pause it right there. This is, by the way, just let me explain this this tactic that they do. And you notice this a lot too, right? Like if they have someone who is somewhat of an outsider, like Senator Vance, or somebody who is not, let's say, pushing back against the narrative that will be repeated all day long on NBC, on MSNBC. What they do is this thing that they never do. You'll never see them do this to Biden. You never see them do this to anyone else who's going with their narrative. Is that they do this thing where they'll ask you a question as absurd as the one that she just asked him is, and then he'll point out something. He'll respond by saying, "Yeah, that's what Biden is doing right now." And then she starts the next question by going, "That's actually not at all what he's doing." But anyway, let's move on to this question. Have you ever noticed when they do that? They do that to Donald Trump almost every time they interview him. So they'll immediately just like almost as if they're weighing in, like, objectively, you're wrong about this. Now, moving on to this question. And they try their best to not let you get a rebuttal. So the way it sounds to the viewer is like, oh, he just got fact checked in real time. And then he moved on to this other thing. He never even had a rebuttal to that. But she actually, by the way, this is how pathetic it is. Her correction of him was that Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor to Donald Trump. The attorney general did that. That's actually her response, her correcting the record, is that, no. I'm saying it would be devastating. It would be such a horrible thing if Donald Trump appointed a special prosecutor to Joe Biden. And he goes, well, that's exactly what Joe Biden just did to Donald Trump. And she goes, no, correction. Joe Biden did not appoint a special prosecutor to Donald Trump. Joe Biden appointed a person who appointed a special prosecutor to Donald Trump. That's actually her defense on this, but she's going to try to act like she like objectively corrected the record. And then watch it here. Just pull it back a few seconds, Brian, because watch this technique. Watch how she immediately after she says this bullshit, she tries to go immediately to like, but we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're going to move on to a different thing. Like, watch this.
Just to be very clear, though, Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor. The attorney general did that. Trump was indicted by grand juries. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in New York. But can we just go back to the core question here? Would you support him taking such an action? It sounds like you're saying, yes, you would.
I would absolutely support investigating prior wrongdoing by our government. Absolutely. That's what you have to have in a system of law and order, Kristen. But I have to reject the premise here. Joe Biden appointed the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who, of course, answers to Joe Biden, can be fired by Joe Biden. So the idea that the Biden administration has nothing to do with the appointment of the special prosecutor, I think, completely betrays a misunderstanding of how our system of government actually works. And of course, Kristen, we have to make this point, Kristen, that the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, which I think now is fundamentally been thrown in doubt by this immunity case, it was one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
And yet the DOJ
that
told
doesn't make you question the legitimacy of the prosecution. That's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week that it reviewed.
It happens.
Hold on, Senator.
Are
let
you
me
really?
finish.
So here, think about this again. And I will say JD Vance does a good job here of responding to this, but you see how she does the exact same tactic again, right? So again, so he points out something that is, by the way, a pretty big piece of information, that like one of the top people from the Justice Department left and then went to work on the case in New York. Yeah, that's pretty nuts. That seems like it's pretty politically motivated. That does seem like, oh yeah, it's Joe Biden's administration trying to like weaponize the justice system against Donald Trump, because that's obviously what it is. And she starts her next sentence by, she has to go, oh, that sort of thing happens all the time. Now, anyway, no, don't interrupt. That sort of thing, imagine that being your defense. Oh, Washington appoints people all the time. That sort of thing happens all the time. No, it fucking doesn't. This doesn't happen all the time. This has never happened before. This has never happened before in American history. Nobody's just like weaponized their Justice Department against their competitor for the presidency and then sent the number 3 guy at the Justice Department over to work on the case. But that doesn't happen all the time. But she's got to correct the record there in this completely ridiculous way and then try her best to like pivot to something else, because that's not the real question. Well, the real question is something else. It's interesting. It's a real corporate media tactic that you just don't see anywhere else in life outside of the corporate media. Strange group of people. All right, let's keep playing.
Government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes. Let me move on, though.
So just pause it for a second. You see that? To just button it up, that's the takeaway here, that you're okay with Donald Trump weaponizing the justice system against his political enemies. So imagine you start an interview, the context being that Joe Biden is currently weaponizing the Justice Department against Donald Trump. Here comes a Trump supporter on, and you're going to argue. And you start with, he threatened to do this when he's in there. And then you make the point, wait, how are you going to be appalled by him threatening to do this when the current president is actively doing this right now? You give a lot of good. She just corrects you with this nonsense. And then she goes, let me sum up what just happened here. When I came up and said, aren't you scared of the threats of Donald Trump weaponizing the Justice Department? And then you said, well, if you're scared of that, I mean, this is literally happening right now. Shouldn't you be appalled by that as well? So let me just put a button on this. You're saying it's okay if Donald Trump does that. That's what you're saying. And then let's move on. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Babbel. This summer, you can start speaking a new language with Babbel. Why Babbel? Because it works. Instead of paying hundreds of dollars for a private tutor or fooling yourself with language apps that are little more than games, Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are designed by over 150 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel is designed by real people for real conversations. All of Babbel's tips and tools for learning a new language are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teachings. Studies from Yale and Michigan State University, as well as others, continue to prove Babbel is better. For instance, one study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is the equivalent to a full semester at college. With over 10 million subscriptions sold, Babbel is real language learning for real conversations. I've always wanted to learn how to speak a new language. I'm going to give Babbel a shot. I'm going to learn a new language with Babbel. You guys come with me on this journey. I'll decide what language I want to learn. Plus, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you to improve your pronunciation and accent. And here's a special limited time deal for our listeners to get you started right now. You can get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/problem. Get 55% off and learn a new language starting right now at babbel.com/problem. That's BABBEL.com/problem. Rules and restrictions may apply. Babbel.com/problem. All right, let's get back into the show. Here, but keep playing. JD Vance does a good job.
Let me move on, though, to my next question. I want to talk to you about the Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative think tank in Washington. It shapes the agenda they would like to see in a Trump second term. The president said this after the Supreme Court's ruling this week. Take a look.
We're in the process of taking this country back. No one in the audience should be despairing. No one should be discouraged. We ought to be really encouraged by what happened yesterday. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Do you support those calls for a revolution, and would political violence ever be justified?
Say, look, the Heritage Foundation does a lot of good work. It does a lot of things that I disagree with, a lot of things that I agree with. But the Heritage Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works on public policy, and I think it's an important part of how D.C. functions and operates. We'll continue to have important conversations in the Republican Party with a whole host of think tanks from the right and from the left as we craft public policy. That's the way the city works. And again, I'm not going to be the person who serves as the spokesperson for the Heritage Foundation. I don't have any affiliation.
Sounds like you're distancing yourself from those comments that talk of political violence.
Look, Kristen, I certainly don't think political violence is justified. That's certainly actually not what I think that Kevin Roberts was saying to begin with. But again, have him on your program to defend what he said. And I think that's the best thing to do.
Let me ask you specifically about Project 2025 for our viewers so that they know. It's basically a policy blueprint for a second Trump presidency. It's supported by the Heritage Foundation and other conservative groups. The Biden campaign has said Project 25, quote, should scare every single American. It would give Trump limitless power over our daily lives. Among the things they are calling for is reversing approval of the abortion pill, mifepristone. But Donald Trump says he supports access to that pill, actually. Do you support access to abortion medication as Donald Trump does?
Well, Kristen, you asked about Project 2025, and I want to be clear here. That Trump explicitly has said his own transition team runs the Trump transition and will run the Trump administration. Again, you have a whole host of organizations, some of which have good ideas, some of which have bad ideas, and some of which have both. And I'm sure the Trump administration will talk to a lot of people as it's crafting an agenda to bring back American manufacturing jobs, to lower inflation, and to bring peace and prosperity back to the world. That's the whole reason why me and so many others are trying to reelect Donald Trump, is because the agenda actually worked. It was his agenda, and I think it'll work again for the American people. On the question of the abortion pill, what so many of us have said is that, look, we certainly don't, the Supreme Court made a decision saying that the American people should have access to that medication. Donald Trump has supported that opinion. I support that opinion. I think it's important to say that we actually have to have an important conversation in this country about what our abortion policy should be. Donald Trump is the pragmatic leader here. He's saying most abortion policy is going to be decided by the states. We want to make it easier and more affordable for young women and parents to have families to begin with. We want to lower housing costs, eliminate those surprise medical bills that so many families see after they have a baby. That's the Trump and Republican approach to this issue. Meanwhile, Joe Biden wants taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. It's so crazy to me how the Democrats frame this as Republicans. Just let me finish, Kristen. They frame Democrats as being reasonable and pragmatic, when in reality, Republicans are the one trying to find some common ground here.
As you know, very few abortions take place later in pregnancy, and almost always because there is a medical emergency. I know Trump is trying to distance himself from Project 2025, but we have to point out that a number of people who are involved with it are former Trump officials: Ben Carson, Peter Navarro, Russ Vought, and others. But just to be clear, you support mifepristone being accessible.
Yes, Kristen, I do. But again, on the Project 2025 issue, what the media and the Democrats are trying to do is attach its most unpopular elements to the Trump administration. It's a 900-page document. I guarantee there are things that Trump likes and dislikes about that 900-page document, but he is the person who will determine the agenda of the next administration. All he said very explicitly is, I am in charge of the next administration because I'm the person running for president. It's just important.
All right, so you can just pause it right there. You can just see these tactics and how like kind of pathetic they are. Like I just couldn't even imagine. And look, I understand that abortion is probably politically speaking the best issue Democrats have going for them right now, and that's why they want to talk about it. But imagine you're trying to damage Trump. So you have a Trump supporter on in JD Vance, and they go like, well, there's this group, Project 2025. Donald Trump says he has distanced himself from it. He's like, no, that's not my agenda. That's just some other people who are saying that. Best of luck to you guys, but that's not mine. And he said some of it's good, some of it's bad. Donald Trump has said he's not trying to ban the pill. JD Vance goes, yeah, I'm not trying to ban the pill. And they go, well, these other guys, they want to. So by the way, the Project 2025 thing is like, as Donald Trump kind of himself pointed out, it's a huge collection of policies. And he said some of them are good, some of them are bad. I tend to agree with him. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. And she's picked one, the one that she thinks is the most unpopular, which Donald Trump does not support, and the guest you're interviewing also does not support. Yet you're just going to grill him over and over again on that? He already answered the question. She just asks it again. Oh, so you would support that being available? Okay, all right. It's like the level of grasping at straws while the country is going through what the country is going through, and his opponent is nearing a state of being brain dead, is just pretty wild to watch. Pretty goddamn wild to watch. All right, we're going to wrap up on that. I will catch you on the next episode. See you guys soon. Peace.